Good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast, otherwise known as the LiiP. I'm your host, Alex Bond. Lucky enough to be joined today by Michael Crawford of Describe Data, not the bionic underwriter, as I kept trying to call it desperately in my mind. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Good morning. How are you, Alex?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, and thanks for making the time. I could talk about how it's a risk engine and it's used to kind of help underwriters create profit and reduce risk. But perhaps you can introduce Describe Data and give our listeners a sort of taste of what it's all about.
Yeah, sure. Describe Data is a company that came out of three people's consultancy experience. So we were doing an awful lot of work for the insurance industry and the data analytics side of things and the actuarial side. And we realized that the industry was ripe for tools that basically employed technology and data in a much more cohesive way. Mm-hmm. And we looked around at what was going on in the market and we settled on specialty underwriting. We looked at specialty underwriting and realized, there was an awful lot of very complex risk being analyzed with a lot of either kind of back of the envelope stuff or spreadsheets or substandard tools. And we realized that we could build a products that would allow underwriters and pricing actuaries to build and do these jobs much more quickly. And we put an idea together in the pre-seed, and we used that to apply for the Lloyd's lab. Mm-hmm. We got into the Lloyd's lab, and we spent the 10 weeks in the Lloyd's lab building an MVP, which was an underwriting engine for specialty risk. And we actually specialized in D&O in the Lloyd's lab because it was a product that we could actually solve in about 10 weeks. Mm-hmm. And out of that came basically, the idea of our Comprino risk engine, and we were off to the races. And since then, we've basically been building out that MVP into a fully productionized product, and we're out at the moment starting to sell that back into the London and the US market.
Oh, fantastic! So, when were you in the Lloyd's lab? Was it 3 years ago?
We were in the Lloyd's lab. We went in April of 2019. So we were in the second cohort.
Oh, okay.
We actually applied for the first cohort of the Lloyd's lab, and we were about 6 weeks old at the time with an idea which took up about one A4 sheet of paper. And we thought, look, if we applied for the Lloyd's lab, we probably won't get in. But in the meantime, it'll allow us to basically flesh out the idea, put legs on it, get feedback on where the weaknesses are. And surprisingly enough, we literally just missed the cut. I think we came 11th out of 10 places out of the 300 people that applied. And we went, okay, look. This was, we've got a lot of experience and we know insurance quite well and we understand technology, but obviously if we're getting this close to the prize, with, effectively what was a very simple, kind of very, very unfleshed out idea, we knew it had legs. So when the second cohort came around, they asked us to reapply again, and it was a no-brainer. And we'd had 6 more months to work on it then, and we had a very, very good idea about what we wanted to do. And it was, I wouldn't say it was a formality, but it was a lot easier of a sell the second time around.
Yeah. And what was that? I like the fact I didn't realise that they sort of stay in touch and things like that. Is it what's it like, that experience of kind of going into the Lloyd's lab? Because people go in at different sort of stages, don't they? You applied at a stage, and 6 months later you apply, so you're obviously at a different stage of progression. How was that for you?
Well, I mean, if you look at the Lloyd's lab, if you think about it, it was a great idea. Lloyd's thinking we need to basically understand, get more innovation into this building and into this market. And if you think about it, that's a very, a relatively low cost, low risk thing for Lloyd's to do, because they're applying space and a bit of, and expertise and, crowdsourcing kind of mentors from the market and stuff like that. It's meant to be very inclusive. They brought in, a great company, which is Marks, to actually, put some flesh around that. They brought in some external people like, Ed Gaze, who'd worked in consultancy, to basically to put some structure on it and run it properly. And they, it has evolved from being, if you look at the first couple of cohorts that we're in, there were a lot more kind of pure startups in it, people coming in with ideas, and how that then engaged with the market, and then how that kind of the traction those companies got. To be honest, I think we were probably in the early stages of the Lloyd's lab where more young companies got in, and what they kind of saw, I think, was the companies that were a little bit more mature, that had a product and maybe one or two customers that were itching, walking around the edges of the market, got a lot more traction and a lot more feedback. So they you can see the sorts of companies that have gone through the lab are changing, and it's becoming, they've kind of worked out what their business model is. At the start, I think they tried to disrupt the whole market from top to bottom, and they realized, actually, no, we kind of need to pick where we're going to have the most effect. So I'm not sure we'd get into the Lloyd's Lab, at the stage we are at now, but we did, and it was, it was the making of us,
Oh, fantastic. Was it, it's just, I mean, it must be amazing to have the room, particularly at the stage you were at, to kind of really put it together and put the flesh on the idea and kind of make it happen.
Yeah, the one thing the Lloyd's Lab gives you, I mean, it's a very adult accelerator program in many ways. They give you basically, here's the keys, here's a Lloyd's pass, here's your desk in the middle of the Lloyd's building. Knock yourself out, kid. There's you'll have a mentor meeting, once or twice, maybe every week, where you've got 6 mentors who've self-selected from various companies. We want something from you. We want a presentation in 10 weeks time off you. Not, and that's, there's no very little kind of, how do you say, structure on that. And that's a good thing, I think, because it allows you then to come in and use the kind of the infrastructure. One of the great things that we used it to as basically a product market fit engine. We had a lot of ideas because we'd done an awful lot of work in consultancy. So we knew the sorts of things that would work with insurance companies in terms of using data and technology. What we weren't particularly sure is of how to present and aggregate those tools into a product. And what we did is we used the lab to crowdsource a kind of focus group of directors and officers, underwriters and chief underwriting officers, and had meetings with them where we basically asked them, like, what are your big problems? What are your big bugbears? What are you afraid of? What makes you lose sleep at night? Those sorts of questions. And we went away and refined that into, first of all, we built a really, really down and dirty, like 1-page app, which we showed people 5 weeks in. And then at the end of the program, we basically built a much more kind of functional version of that, still MVP, that basically took in all the ideas that we crowdsourced and listened to people, and basically said, look, this is the way you think about the problem. Here's a lot of really useful tools that you probably don't know about and you don't understand because you're not technology people or data analytics people, but this is how you could use those tools to solve that problem. And we presented that. And we continued doing that after the lab. We used the kind of 4 or 5 months after the lab to actually talk to a lot more people and get a lot more feedback and refine that process.
Yeah.
I think we had something like 100 meetings in 10 weeks in the Lloyd's Lab.
Wow.
You think about it, there's a lot of quite serious meetings. We wouldn't have got that anywhere else. I think we have a kind of soundbite that we used a couple of times. It's that we did about 18 months of business development in 10 weeks. Because you just it's like drinking through a fire hose is another thing. And we kind of, we just grabbed every opportunity.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, we touched on this just before the recording started. Getting kind of insurance subject matter experts, and I know, and we'll sort of go into your background. I know that you have quite an interesting background, but obviously been in the insurance market for a long time in various points. But getting that subject matter expertise into your kind of business, into an insurtech startup, seems to me essential, and it seems to be the thing that sometimes people sort of struggle with. You've got a great concept technology wise on insurance, but there's either a resistance to bring in insurance subject matter experts, or kind of an inability to bring them in, or certainly it's one thing that I see is trying to bring them in cheaply when you're trying to pay for it. And I suppose Lloyd's, as you're saying, it gives you exposure to that, and you're able to pull those people in, and must be hugely valuable.
I think it is. I mean, I've seen this along the course of my career, because I started off training as an actuary and then got into IT more or less immediately, like in my mid-20s, and retrained as a coder. Went through the whole apprenticeship, ended up working for people like Microsoft as well. I kind of moved out of financial services and insurance into pure tech, and then back into tech. And the one thing, you kind of forget that in software, the industry is quite a young industry, and that whole engineering kind of mindset that, has, traditional building engineers have figured out how to build things so, they don't fall down by over engineering and speccing things well. You could see that, and if you look at cathedrals, used to fall down quite a lot in the Middle Ages and stuff like that, because they used to push the outside limits and there was no real plans and stuff like that. Engineers figured out that doesn't work. Software industry kind of figured that out as well over the last 20 or 30 years. But if you look at the 70s and 80s, when I kind of got into developing in the 80s, it was a lot less rigorous. And so likewise, so actually bringing those ideas into companies was actually difficult, and there were a lot of failures. Now you saw that industry mature and understand that, it had to talk to the people who had the problem, and it had to basically plan and build differently to build successful software products and build them into industry. So there's an issue there on the software side that it is quite immature, and it's only maturing now. And the tools to get those kind of those techniques and products built efficiently and safely are just about, are maturing. And on the flip side of that, there's no real, and especially in industries like insurance, there hasn't really been a tradition of you having to break that process down into atomic steps so you could codify it. Unlike the manufacturing industries, where they have things like, Henry Ford, etc., did this, in the 20s and 30s. Yeah. And that's quite a difficult cognitive leap for the companies themselves to actually think, why do I have to sit here and tell you in minute detail what I do? It seems like a waste of time. So there's two things going on there. And it's like there's a cultural shift that says, look, we have to do this so we can build this safely, and we have to jump together. And that has taken a lot longer to come into insurance. I saw it coming into the P&C insurers and the life insurance over the 80s and 90s. Yeah. It's almost like going back to that time when going back into the specialty insurance market, which is still quite, in many ways, there's a lot less technology involved. You're having to do that education piece again. So you do get some resistance of companies coming and saying, look, if I could, why should I have to tell you you should just give me what I want rather than me have to tell you what I need? And the answer is you kind of have to do both.
Yeah, it's like trying to ask a doctor to tell you what's wrong, but refusing to talk to them.
There is a certain amount of like that. You tell me, and there's a kind of, we're going to, and that's what we found at Lloyd's Lab was really good, because we could kind of come in with an idea and show them something, and then tell them. It's very easy to say, what don't you like here? Because someone will always tell you why they hate it, and then not do that. Almost do the flip side of it. It's much easier for you to actually show somebody something and tell them, what you don't like, and what you actually give them a framework to construct, to give you an idea about what they really want. But if you go in with a blank piece of paper and say, look, tell me what you want, that's generally not the best place to start, because you're just going to spend a lot of time spinning your wheels.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked about your team, and we covered off you being an actuary. So we mentioned this when we spoke. It's quite an unusual move. So go to the effort of training to be an actuary. And then how long were you an actuary before you went?
I got about 2/3 the way through my actuarial exams in my mid-20s, and really kind of woke up one day and realized that it's not what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
I just realized it seemed like I did maths in college, and it's a logical step. And I just realized I fundamentally realized, and this is probably in the late 80s, early 90s, that I just much preferred engineering. Yeah. And it wasn't actually it was something that wasn't on the actuarial career track. The actuarial career track was go and work in all parts of an insurance company, going and working the pricing side and the reserving side, and then basically you'll be, you end up on the board or you end up CEO, and that career track changed an awful lot. You see a lot less CEOs as actuaries now.
Yes.
But what definitely wasn't on the career track for an actuary was IT, and tech. And people thought it was career suicide at the time, but I realized, look, I have to skip to work every day. So I just basically made a big leap and decided to just completely change. At the end of the 90s, as I was doing that, when I kind of did that full time, because there was an awful lot of work around. People were having to rewrite all their quotation platforms for Y2K, and I set up a business doing that. And it was really, for the 3 or 4 years that we were in business, because it kind of tailed off after kind of like 2001. It was very, very successful. And that's effectively where I learned my craft, how to write software at scale, how to write software for money, on time and on budget, those sorts of things. And again, having the domain knowledge of tech and IT, and especially a lot of the systems we were writing were highly technical, complex mathematical quotation systems, especially on the life and pension side, where there's a lot of financial math. It was a real education.
Yeah. So because this is not your first startup, is it? That's something important to cover off.
After that, I was involved in. I did a lot of contract work for people, and then I was involved in a startup which was we built an online brokerage for insurance products and financial products in general. Now, this is back in just after the .com. I got involved in the .com boom, and that I was involved with the financial products company, and that basically imploded spectacularly. That was absolutely brilliant. I always call that my real world MBA, because it was about you got the learnings of an MBA at only about 5 to 10 times the cost. But you learn to, those sorts of lessons you learn when you're crying on your knees in front of a web server in a freezing cold colo facility at 2 in the morning. You don't get those sort of lessons kind of like, in a classroom. And from out of that, what happened was after the dot-com crash, a gang of us who'd worked in various different industries, telcos, etc., realized, this is still a good idea. And we kind of scaled the idea down and built an affinity-based financial services product that was basically online. So we plugged it into a lot of corporate intranets, which were just starting to basically be used in big companies like Oracle in Dublin and PwC and the health service over here. And we basically went to the banks and insurance companies and said, look, we've got 60,000 to 100,000 people on our books who are all highly paid. They're working for Intel, they're working for Oracle, they're working for Vodafone. They've got serious jobs. We want a best in kind of league product for a mortgage. We want a best in line product for car insurance with serious discounts for our membership. And we put everything on one website, which was quite simple, but used a lot of functionality for quoting, and then punched it into corporate intranets, and that absolutely took off. And it worked. We'd scaled down the idea. We used technology in a different way. We engaged with the financial services companies. The company ended up being bought by one of the biggest insurance companies in Ireland. Unfortunately, after I'd left, but right. There you go. So it was an idea. So that was it. Then working with I was working with two very good business guys. One guy was on the financial sales guy, product guy, and the other guy was a pure marketing ex-Diageo guy. And I was the CTO. We built everything ourselves, including the laptops, the computers, the firewalls, because we had no money. Right. And that was, we built it literally Robinson Crusoe style for very little money, and it worked. But it was a real education. So you learn that kind of, there is a certain craft or kind of I wouldn't say kind of apprenticeship that working for yourself and doing startups really is very useful. I would always encourage people to do it. And because you'll always get a job, you'll never starve to death. And the skill set it gives you and the resilience it gives you is amazing.
Do you think that's specific as well to you and I have talked previously about investment. I think it's really important to at least have that experience of doing it on a shoestring and bootstrapping it, being in the weeds and building it together. Whether you go out and get investment is irrelevant, and at some point investment's inevitable if you want it to fly. But I think not just important enough to start a startup. You can go and work up a startup, but if you work at a startup that's been given a few 100 million quid to start with, it's not quite the same thing, right?
Yeah, we see that. You can see that the two models. We kind of call this the European model versus the American model. Yeah. And the American model, facetiously is like, you have an idea, you go and raise $5 million, and you basically, source a team, and you buy a foosball table and a dog, and you basically come up and you basically build an MVP, and you're off to the races. And then the European side is more kind of almost what we've done, which is you have an idea, and then you basically bootstrap it, in a crazy manner, and you build everything yourself, and everything takes twice as long, and you have all those problems. And there's a lot to be said for both. What we're seeing with a lot of VCs now is they love that kind of European sensibility with that American kind of ambition. They love something in the middle. And that's kind of what we've kind of crowdsourced this ourselves and bootstrapped our own businesses, because first of all, we more or less had to validate the idea to start off with. Is the product, we understand the product, the product is going to be needed. But there's also, when you're doing something new in technology, there's that why now question. Why, technology can do this, but why are people going to buy it now? Why is their hair on fire enough to want to change what they're doing at the moment? So it's all well and good doing something magical and and innovative if no one wants to buy it. And we had that experience with one of our first ideas was to look at terrorism and global kidnap risk, and we've done some quite interesting work on it. Put a very quick MVP together. People loved it, but they were like, yeah, there's a gap in the market here, but there's no market in the gap. So you kind of have to, having validated that idea and made the technology, that's a very useful way. Then you kind of need the classic thing would probably to be looking for some, a small amount of money, and not just pure money that comes, smart money that comes in from people in the industry. We're looking at raising a friends and family round, seed round probably in the next few months. And the people we're talking to are people that we talk to in the Lloyd's lab. There are, people with Enterprise Ireland, have been very, very good to us. They will back us, and they have a massive amount of infrastructure, and they're helping us and introducing us to people in London in insurance and in banking along the way. So it's money that comes with extra things attached.
Yeah.
And then the VC model that is very good after that is like, right, we need to scale this. We need to pour on the rocket fuel. And that's where, pure VC money is really, really useful and probably has the most effect. You see a lot of people taking money very early, and the VC, that could actually be invidious or probably not great for a small company. It could upset the dynamics of what needs to be done, because the metrics are probably wrong. They're looking for pure return on capital, whereas you might actually be looking for return of capital. Might actually be a problem rather than a return on it. So yeah, there are lots of pros and cons, and I think that's, some people take a lot of money too early, and I think some people don't take money when they should take money.
Yeah.
And I think we're at the stage now where we know we've kind of resisted taking money until now. Now we kind of know we have problems that money can solve.
Yeah.
Whereas now, before, we didn't. We had business problems like, who wants to buy this? How much will they pay for it? Will they buy it again next year? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, timing I think appears to be the thing, and absolutely, like, how smart or not is it? I think when we talk about kind of investment, quite often we focus purely on the money side of it, but yeah, what does it bring? What contacts do they have? What time frame do these people work to?
If you get the wrong investor, if you get the wrong investor on your board, or with at the wrong time, it can be absolutely toxic. There's a classic email that's gone around recently of a guy who basically retired as the kind of CEO and board member. I think it's of Circle. I can't remember the exact, and it's he basically sent this excoriating kind of exit email to one of his investors on his board, and it's it's eye-watering to read.
I'll have to seek that out. We'll put a link. That'll be out there. So sorry, you keep talking about we. So obviously we've got to talk about the team. So how big's the business now? Is it 5 people you're at?
We have there are 3 co-founders, and we have a pure technology guy who's not a founder, but he's coming on board as our CTO. He's we work out of a kind of high kind of tech incubator space in the city centre of Dublin. So that's been incredible for marketing resources, tech resources. It's it's backed by Google. So we've been very lucky that we've been managing to keep the core team down to a very few people as possible, and then pull in world-class people when design people, tech people. At the moment we're dealing with a couple of people who are revamping all our kind of collateral, our marketing collateral, our decks, our sales deck, our investor decks, our one pages, etc., etc. So we've managed to keep that. That's the whole kind of lean kind of like bootstrap startup. We are technically 3 to 4 people full time, with a core group of people around that we pull in when we can. And the great thing about doing out of a startup tech center is, like, Google have given us a lot of free tech, a lot of pure money in terms of free compute, massive amounts of mentoring. With a core team of people who have worked in tech and finance. So they've introduced us to, people running insurance companies all over Europe who've spoken to us about their needs and stuff like that. So you can be very, very clever about, rather than just going on a hiring spree, you can basically keep that down to as minimum as possible. We'd like to be in the position to hire probably next year, and the next couple of people are going to be pure tech and pure sales.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think it's so much out there as well to support that. I lived in Brighton for a long time. Brighton's got a really good sort of innovation lab and support there, and you can plug yourself into these things. And even as someone that works in recruitment, I sat in one because I like the energy of it. And
the energy is great.
Yeah, exactly. And that's that's the thing that people don't talk about enough, is that it's hard, right? Getting something off the ground, and like you say, you're bootstrapping it. I like your
the flip side of that is that people, that's a great community, and it's a very give and take community. So as much as we take from it, we give to it. I mean, we're kind of probably very much the elder statesman in there, and we've got a lot of war wounds. So people come and ask us, like, I've got one of my co-founders, Jerry, was the vice president, VP of infrastructure for Renaissance Re for a long time. So he's got a lot of corporate experience dealing with corporates and being dealing with staff and staff issues and scaling teams and building teams. So people used to come up and just ask us questions daily about how to do, how would you solve this problem? How would I go about hiring a technical team? Would you hire it here, or or in Portugal? And so those we kind of get them for, like, come and work on our serverless infrastructure, and they ask us questions like, how do I hire a remote team, or how do I incentivize or deal with a very difficult employee and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's kind of a give and take,
Yeah. No, I used to get that. I was always I won't lie, I was always the unwelcome guy in the room, because as soon as you say you work in recruitment, everyone sort of seems to part. But then you'd get a quiet knock on your desk, and someone go, "I'm trying to hire. I don't want to pay too much," and have all those questions. But I love the energy of those things, and there's so much free resource out there, and I think people they're not aware of that. How did you and your founders? Are you all ex-colleagues? Did you work together in the past? Is that how you came?
That's a story. I mean, technically, the founding myth of Described Data is that we were, there's a gang of us that were all kind of very, very close together, and we all had this kind of amorphous group of us meet in a very old pub in the city centre of Dublin, in the Snug. And because we'd meet there every Friday, and we'd sat down, myself, Jerry and Mick, we'd known each other for a long time. I've known Jerry since I was a kid. We started working together in our first jobs. Mick, he was a trainee COBOL developer, and I was a trainee actuary, literally in our teens. My other co-founder, Michael, is a data scientist, but he comes from a hedge fund background. He's a theoretical physics background, high performance computing, and a PhD in quant finance. He also runs one of the biggest and most successful data science meetup groups in Ireland. And I started going to it about 7 or 8 years ago, when data science was like, no one had heard of it, but I kind of realized it was a new thing. And so we all kind of coalesced together, and we became very good friends. We were sitting in the pub one night, myself and Mick were saying, look, we're doing all this work for insurance companies on a piecemeal basis. We're getting projects. And Jerry, with his just taken, redundancy from Renry, was like, you've got a product there. So, and then, the product idea was, and then the Lloyd's Lab came up, the first cohort of the Lloyd's Lab, and we thought, let's just give this a rattle.
Yeah.
With this, but that's, I mean, it's a typical Irish founding story. We were sitting there over really good pints of Guinness, going, you two have got a good idea. I think we could put a product wrapper around that. Here's an innovation program that will either prove or disprove whether we have that idea or not. It'll take us a few days to basically flesh this out and apply. Let's give it a rattle. And that's basically how we started.
Yeah.
It's probably, and that's probably the ideal way of doing it. It kind of came out of, 3 people who've known each other a long time, respected each other with very different skill sets.
Yeah.
Thinking, right, how do we well, and our idea was, let's moneyball underwriting of specialty lines. Because it's not really being done at the moment, and the data's out there. Unfortunately, the data is very, very hard to get hold of, very hard to understand and interpret, and very hard to present to people. And that was exactly what our sweet spot was, doing those 3 things.
Yeah. It's not. It's funny. I always love to ask how the founders have met, because it's never some linear pathway. It's not like, because there are obviously those platforms out there, and Founders First is a really good example of, they get talented people in a room and try and sort of pitch them together, and that's almost like the pop stars way of making a band, right? But the best way of making a band is we met down the pub and we all get on and we sing the same songs, right? So
yeah, I mean, we've been through, at the start of the business, we actually had we had a small consultancy firm, and we had quite 3 or 4 different founders and co-founders, because we were more of a partnership model. And, those people have kind of evolved and come and gone. And the pure product company, though, is with Described Data. It's myself, Jerry, and Mick, and then we kind of come up. But it definitely hasn't been a linear path. No. And it definitely hasn't been, everyone always kind of tells a very succinct story about how they founded their company, but it's never, it's like, it starts a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting what you said about you've all got different skills as well. Do you think that's important to kind of making a startup work? Because you don't fight on each other's kind of battleground, as it were. You know that you're the domain expert for some area. I think
Yeah, I think it's very important. Like Mick, who's our CTE, is effectively our CTO, CDO, chief data guy, is a pure, absolute amazing data analyst and data technician. He's just a pure genius. the stuff that he can do is terrifying. And I have no, I mean, I can audit his work and I can understand the stuff that he does.
Yeah.
I have no, we have no say in whether it's right or wrong in many ways. And what we've done to combat that is we've all made ourselves go off and get our own adult supervision. So he has a mentor who is an ex-Goldman Sachs trader, physicist guy who, I have someone very similar, and Jerry has someone very, very similar. And we have an overarching chairperson of our board who is an ex-Enterprise Island woman from fintech woman from with years of experience in this, who's basically, who basically holds our feet to the coals every 2 weeks. We have a meetup. So you do need to have very, very disparate skill sets that overlap slightly. And you do need to put in place mechanisms to make sure that there is some constraints put on that. We call it adult supervision. You are not just like saying stuff because you think it's right. I think that's very important, because a lot of people will say, if Jerry said to me, the sky is orange, and in his domain, I'd have no way of telling really whether he's pulling he's misguided or he's so we kind of put that kind of almost kind of a belt and braces kind of structure around the company to ensure that bad decisions get called very, very quickly and changed.
But I think that's no, sorry.
I think it's very important as well that you also have a healthy degree of respect for each other, but you also have a healthy degree of, I wouldn't say confrontation, but there's a healthy degree of you definitely don't need to be agreeing with each other all the time. You do need some kind of, I don't think you're right. You need and be able to reach a consensus to make decisions, because they're always the best ones. Where you've all, the decisions that have been made, after you've had an argument with your co-founders and had to change 3 or 4 things to make it better, are the much more strong and the stronger decisions that get made.
Yeah, because you need the ideas to be challenged so they're robust, right? So and it's about. I always think one of the skills that I would say that people need at the starting stage is the ability to change and be willing to change. Because a friend of mine's talking about a startup at the moment, and even just down to the formation and the 10-year plan, 5-year plan, and they were going, oh, we just want to get on it. Is that not important? And my sort of discussion with them, I said, look, have a lot of the arguments now. Because if you have the arguments now, then you sort of get to a place that you're happy with. But what you can't do is just, because essentially it was coming from places they were unhappy about certain things that had been put in place. And I went, they're not going to go away. It doesn't mean that it's going to change to your will, but you need to discuss them. Everyone kind of can challenge them. And I think the ability to challenge is incredibly important. But it also speaks to the type of person you are to make it successful. Because you can't be someone that's so fragile that if your idea gets challenged, you are, you're going to react in a sort of overly negative way.
Or throw your toys out of the pram and walk off, because you're going to have some, if you're involved in a startup, there are going to be some great times, but the real test of the strength and resilience of the company is hard times. Times like now. I'm not, the last 7 or 8 months since mid-March have been, the companies that survive this, fair play to them. It's been absolutely horrendous. We kind of having been through some hard times before, we recognized it very, very early on, and we kind of made some really, really binary, hard, saw your leg off decisions in mid-March. Nail the checkbook to the table. This is what we're doing. This is the absolute priority for the next 3-6 months. And it's survival. At any cost. And the companies that aren't able to make those decisions quickly in a safe environment, row in behind that decision that's being made and execute it, are bunched.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. How has the last kind of 6, 7, 8 months?
Well, it's been. I mean, it's actually been a lot. If you'd asked me that question in March, I'd have probably just gone away and hidden under my desk for an hour. Because I knew what was coming. We did a very quick kind of straw poll we had a couple of really nailed on companies that were about to start work with us, and they just stopped. They just couldn't even answer the phones for 6 weeks, because I knew it's completely understandable. We were about to raise a certain amount of money. We started to put that in place, and we talked to a lot of VC companies that because with the where we work in the startup incubator, there's a lot of VC money and a lot of friendly VCs around. Talk to people that we knew quite well, people like Eamon Carey, who's involved in Techstars in London, and he said, look, everyone's going to tell you they're open for business, but forget about it. They're just going to try and keep the companies they've invested in alive. My advice to you guys is basically just batten down the hatches and do everything you can to stay alive. And that is effectively what we did. We were about to raise money to build the product, the production version of the product. We realized that we weren't going to be able to do that, or it would just been a waste of our time trying to put that business plan or that investor documentation together. And we just said, right, we have the technical skills to do this ourselves. We've got a lot of help from Google, and we hired the best infrastructure guy that we could hire, who is a friend of ours that we know from, he'd just come out of another tech company in the startup space that we were working in. And we basically made him an offer he couldn't refuse. And we spent the next 5 months building. The three of us literally just built everything from scratch ourselves. And that was basically, the idea was not ideal, but it was forced on us. And we were in the fortunate position to be able to do that. And what has happened on the start of that is we kind of came out of kind of stealth, probably mid to late July, maybe early August, and started showing people what we'd built. We showed maybe 5 or 10 people the infrastructure and the kind of front end that we built on top of our risk engine. Took a lot of that criticisms and advice on board, rejigged all of that, and then we've been slowly but surely introducing that product to people probably since mid-September. So we used the opportunity in the best way. I would say opportunity, in the best way we could. And we basically used it to build our own product. It was and we all reconfigured the company around it. Jerry, our COO, became the project manager. I became the front end developer. I taught myself Node and Material UI and built a potential career as a UX developer if this all goes badly wrong, I think. And on the data side, Mick basically built out the models, and we basically built our own massive data store. We did a deal with BVD to bring in all their data. We did a great deal, a research partnership with Stanford University to bring in all their corporate actions data. And we basically used Google and the money they've given us to build this incredible serverless, scalable infrastructure in the cloud. And now we built that, and it works. And we've done it without any investment.
Yeah.
Now it slowed us down.
Yeah,
but, it slowed. There was nothing else going on for those 5 months. So.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is that the massive irony is that you were going to go out for investment, had to build it yourself, but once you built something yourself, we know you're in a stronger position when you want to go and get some investment.
I pity anyone who does tech due diligence with us, because it's like, every single bit we wrote, every single bit.
Yeah,
it's like we built our own pyramid.
Yeah.
But it's like, so it's your eyes would start bleeding after about half an hour, I think, if you started talking to us about it.
I won't get into that. That's definitely outside.
This is a different podcast.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you about AI and because AI is obviously something that kind of is applicable to your product and what you're looking to do. How is it involved in your product, and also kind of, I wanted to sort of talk generally about your experience of kind of people utilizing AI in insurance, because it seems like a natural marriage of.
I mean, I've thought this for years. I remember I took about 4 or 5 years off in about 2009 when the financial crisis hit Ireland. Myself and my wife had a couple of businesses, and we realized that they were going to be the next 4 or 5 years were going to be horrendous. Yeah. And we had a small kid, and we'd worked 100 hours a week between the two of us, each hadn't much of a family life. So we went to Spain for a year in early 2009 and didn't come back until 2013. Ended up living in Barcelona and just literally took a sabbatical. We'd worked constantly for the previous 20 years and had a kid who was 3 or 4. I kind of spent a lot of time when I was there retraining, learning a lot of maths, learning a lot of tech and stuff like that. And I had an idea that machine learning and tech were going to basically be very important going forwards. If you remember, coming as an actuarial, from an actuarial background, up to that stage, even though I was involved in it, it was very much it wasn't front and center. It was very much a cost center rather than a profit center. Yeah. And that I kind of realized very quickly when I got back in 2013. I started going to meetup groups, which were big. It started to be big, and one of them was Dublin R, and Dublin R was actually founded and run by Mick Cooney, who's one of the co-founders. And about 10 minutes into the first talk, I realized this stuff is going to absolutely go through insurance like a hot knife through butter. And I was probably about 5 years too early.
Yeah.
You know, it took a long time. I set up a data analytics consultancy almost immediately when I came back with another guy I met at that meetup group. And we got various bits of work from insurance companies and did relatively well, not super well, but it was a constant battle of just going into companies and realizing that they had the data, but they didn't really need to do anything about it. Slowly but surely realized that data analytics and machine learning, and latterly AI, which is probably only the last couple of years, which is almost the next iteration of machine learning, we're slowly but surely going to make inroads into insurance companies. But there was a massive adoption. The adoption, the classic adoption curve for technologies kind of looks like this kind of hysteresis curve, where you basically you get a small amount of early adopters, and then it chunks up, and then it kind of runs very, very quickly. You get the kind of late adopters. And for AI and machine learning in the insurance industry, we're still in the bottom left of that curve. We're still at the early adopters phase, and it's knocking on the door of it's going to become mainstream, and you can see it. But it's now now in 2020. We started this, looking at this sort of stuff in 2013. It's 7 years ago. The technology's moved on massively. The computing power has moved on incredibly. The software is absolutely, and the use of that software and how you use it, it's got a lot better. So it's an absolute poster child for being used in insurance. The issues that the insurance industry have is that traditionally it hasn't really used a lot of its data in those ways. So it's actually quite hard to get at within insurance companies, and they haven't been used to collecting it at scale. And that's something that they're having to change and scramble to change. So that's why it hasn't been almost kind of like, I thought there was going to be a kind of like, this is a no-brainer. Everyone's going to open their doors and embrace us with open arms, and we're going to skip, coalesce into a big ball of happiness, and we're going to skip off into the distance, and it's been almost, I wouldn't say, it's been a very, very slow process of embracing IT, technology, and data.
Why do you think, is that cultural, or is it, because the element, you've got these big successful insurance companies, and they're successful in using their data the way they've always used it. So I suppose it's to look at it other than what would be, I imagine, a very significant investment of capital, because it would be changing in the way that they collect data, changing the way they process, hiring new people. I mean, we're seeing that it's a huge investment. What's been the sort of key thing that you think people are not pushing ahead with it for?
I think legacy and technical debt are one big issue. And one of the things you end up talking to quite senior people in the industry, which we've done via we've got a lot of access via the Lloyd's Lab. The one thing you hear on the flip side is from people who've implemented technologies, like it's been a disaster, as in and that's that cognitive, like a load of data scientists are 25 straight out of college coming in going, hey, we've got all the tools. And then, meeting an industry that's 300 years old going, and everyone thinking these people underestimating the complexity, and those people on the other side thinking, okay, this is a data science machine. I press the red button on the top and money falls out the bottom. So that goes very much back to the bottom of what we were saying about how do you get technology into companies. You have there's that middle bit where you have to basically find out what the needs and where the big wins are. That's very, very, that's been tricky. There's also a lot of experience when you get down to the kind of the second order things that people have done this, and they've made great strides in it, but it's very hard to scale these kind of things and put this stuff into production in big companies. You can do something where you save 10 million quid, but if 10 million quid is not going to move the needle at someone like AIG or Liberty Mutual or say Score. You want to be like, I need to basically do this at scale and save 100 million quid. And that's really tricky. That's where your traditional kind of project management IT stuff is very, very different. So there are lots of it's not that kind of what looks like a plain sailing is actually quite a difficult path to trod. It's a bit of a minefield. So there are lots of reasons, and they're not sexy. They're just hard, painful, take time, but it will happen. There's the costs are too low. You saw what's happened in the financial services industry for companies like on the fintech side, on the banking side. That would be a good model for the insurance industry to look at. 10 years ago, no one had heard of Revolut, and
Mm,
Now everyone's heard of N26, Revolut, Starling, Monzo,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and those companies are going to come out of the London market. A lot of them are going to come out of the Square Mile. They're going to come out of Instech London. You know, we used to see people like Marshmallow, the two guys that just took 30 million quid for 10% of their companies. They're two twins that, you know, used to meet regularly at Instech. You know, I saw Couva pitch when they were weeks old, you know, and they were like, we've got this idea for car insurance by the hour. And, you know, look at them now, you know, that was 5 years ago.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, that's why I was kind of baffled by, I almost think with some of the big incumbents, they'd be better off kind of creating a parallel business, which they invest in with the long-term view that, you know, it's a pure, you know, digitally native, you know, it uses all the kind of latest tools and techniques for looking at data, utilizing kind of their product knowledge or their kind of area of expertise, and just starting it afresh with the view that eventually it probably overtakes the parent. But I just wonder about, you know, a lot of these companies are publicly traded companies. It goes back to almost back to that investment idea of that if you're a publicly traded company, you've got to look about your share price, you've got to deliver kind of value to your shareholders, and making a kind of 10-year, 20-year plan, and investing heavily in that sometimes is very, very challenging. So, you know, lots
very
of
difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
So culturally, that can be very difficult in a big company. Having worked for a lot of big companies, you know, and especially, you know, companies, you know, these companies are quite, you know, they're not there. I don't think they've reached that kind of Kodak moment yet. You know, that kind of the hair on fire moment.
No.
And that is there's a certain amount of, I think, to a degree in a lot of industries when you see how technology change comes in. You know, I'm doing a talk for a big reinsurer in Ireland in a couple of weeks on innovation. And one of the things I was looking at, I found a cover of, it was about this. I found a cover of Forbes from October 2007 with the head of, you know, the CEO of Nokia on board, and it says like 1 million customers. Who can stop the Nokia behemoth? You know, 1 billion customers. You know, and it's like this was October 2007. The iPhone was released in just the end of June that year.
Wow.
You know that war was lost by 2013.
Yeah.
You know, it's just so people forget. You know, 5 years is a long time in tech. You know? It's you know, it's not a long time for an insurance company, especially a traditional insurance company that, you know, traditionally probably thinks in years. To, you know, one of the classic quotes I remember from when I think it was the Agnellis bought Partner Re. You know, someone said, "Oh, now we can." One of the people I know said, "Now we can start thinking in quarter centuries." Because it's private money with a long-term view. And if you think of an insurance company like Partner Re, which is a life insurance company, that actually makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting about timescales, and certainly, you know, I was sharing an unnamed company, but you know, who were going to enter. They were a tech company entering the insurance market, and as I was telling you, it was really interesting because they asked for the advice on how they should launch this insurance product, and essentially were dictating that it wasn't quick enough, because the mindset is MVP. It's like, right, we'll get something going, we'll do it as quick as possible, and then we'll kind of, you know, evolve that product as we go. And that's not the culture of insurance. You know, you don't create a product and then kind of learn as you go, because it's too expensive.
Also, you know, the regulatory burdens do not allow that, for a start. The regulatory oversight. So there's a certain amount. Well, the sandbox has done something to basically ameliorate that. You know, in the UK, and to a certain degree. But insurance is almost in the perfect storm, and that you actually probably, and banking is probably a bit similar, like retail banking. You don't want those types of people running your Pillar 1 banks and your Pillar insurance. You want people that you don't want to sit next to at a dinner party, because they're the right people for that job. Like, it sounds, you know, I have a friend of mine who's a pilot, you know, and she is the most level-headed, sound person you will ever meet. She's exactly the right person to be a pilot. You know? She's brilliant, you know. You think, you know, you sleep, you get on the plane, she's flying, you're like, great, you know. But that, you know, you don't want someone who goes parachuting at the weekend, you know, and caving and stuff.
Funny enough, my ex-partner was scared of flying, and EasyJet do this fear of flying course, and it's quite good. It's like a 2-day thing. You go, and there's a pilot, and they literally talk you through the mechanics of a plane. They talk you about the engineering principles, and then it culminates with the most depressing flight you've ever taken, because you go turn up at Luton Airport, and your ticket says from Luton to Luton, and you literally take off, do like half an hour, and come back down, and then they bring this pilot out to talk you through on the plane. So he's in the cabin with you, and he talks you through the plane. And the guy walks in, and he's like 6'3", he's about 60, he's got a fantastic handlebar moustache. He's like, he did 25 years.
Voice like oil, just like this cunning voice, you know.
He did 25 years in the RAF, and he'd been a commercial pilot for 15 years. And I was like, if every pilot walked on looking like that, no one would be scared of flying. This was your guy, you know. But no, no, sorry, go on.
There is that issue, you know, with, you know, that maybe, you know, the companies that actually, you know, having to need to innovate are probably not culturally, you know, almost engineered not to have that built into them.
Yeah.
And that's an issue because, you know, and we could be having this conversation in 10 years time where, you know, companies like Revolut have taken over and then, you know, have you know, spectacularly, you know, blown up and caused the next financial crisis.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, classic regulation is, you know, they're always fighting the last war.
Yeah. It was, I mean, the insurance industry is very robust, and you've got to look at it from you know, what's been going on. You know, I mean, it's built to think about the worst case scenario, right? And so generally it's and it has
and not to be thought of until you actually need, you know, never, you know. So there's a whole, it is quite a different industry to banking, and that the rewards, you know, slightly different. The risk reward ratio is done slightly differently. But you also have you know, I suppose with, you know, with the kind of the tech companies coming in, we're going back to, you know, this is the whole, you know, we're coming in to change this industry. You know, we've got tech, we've done an MBA, we've worked in Google, you know, insurance, how difficult could it be? And it's that, well, we've been here 300 years and we've seen, like, you know, many wars, recessions that you wouldn't even believe. You know, we've just, you know, we've been through all, and we're still here. So we must be doing something right.
Yeah.
There is that resilience, and I mean, the classic Lloyd's, you know, having worked inside Lloyd's, you know, it's very anachronistic. But the fact that the way it works is that it basically spreads risk around very, very well has been an absolute boon for the last 300 years, and allowed things to do trade, you know, to across the globe to basically expand because it was the backstop, because it managed to spread that risk around. So there's a lot to be said, you know. You've got to have that yin and yang, you know, and that's why we see a lot of technology companies coming in going, you know, this is an easy win, and a lot of insurance companies going like, we don't need technology. And the answer is, you're both wrong. The truth is right in the middle. It's been fascinating speaking to quite a few insurtechs recently, and some of the more established ones, and where there seems to be a crucial role. I met a guy, and you know, essentially his role was kind of the carrier relationships, and he said, you know, it was getting the insurance guys to respect, you know, my team, and getting my team to respect the insurance guys. And he said, essentially, I'm the referee, and that's the way it works. And I just thought it was interesting. And I think, like, a lot of those businesses have matured, and certainly the businesses I'm seeing enter the market have more mature ideas, and you know, they've come to the table because there's now an ecosystem of insurtechs, you know. And I think you can look at what the successful ones look like, and look, they're all very different, but there seems to be a theme of the ones that seem to make it work more collaboratively with the existing market and the incumbent market, and see it as utilizing that experience and knowledge and that's there, and then just kind of bringing something, and also tackling specific wins, you know, specific niches that and as to your point earlier about your original idea, you know, there might be a specific niche, but is it a big enough market? Is it a profitable market? And will people pay for it? You know, and we'll pay, you know, that sort of stuff is a very, very so there's a lot of insurance ideas out there, and there's a lot of people saying, you know, and you are going to see probably an awful lot of companies come and go and fail. But that's the nature of startups. It's also, you know, the way that, you know, the technology has made this sort of stuff. We couldn't have set this business up 10 years ago. No. You know, we need the computing power of a nation state 10 years ago to do what we're doing. You know, that you know, if you actually look at the cost and power of computing, like halving every year effectively, which is what it's doing, it's just terrifying. I mean, you know, the technology we're using at the back end, you know, to store the data that we're storing is a serverless technology by Google. Google gave us, you know, many tens of thousands of euros in free compute, which we actually, because of the way we actually use, we more or less use compute on demand. We, you know, we don't get charged when we're not actually using that computer effectively, which is kind of the next level of serverless, the next level of kind of the cloud. it's somebody else's uptime. We struggle to spend that money, even at scale where we were ingesting and using data.
Yeah.
It's so the cost of this stuff is just falling through the floor. And the next data is slowly but surely becoming a commodity in my book. So any data plays with stuff that was really difficult 4 or 5 years ago is going to be relatively easy. And if you talk to the data companies that we talked about, they get that. They get that they're basically going to be able to charge a lot less for their data. It's becoming a commodity. The big ones, especially the Moody's and the etc. The people like Verisk and people like that. The next big kind of value add then is basically insights from that data and how you make money from that data, and that's the space that we've positioned ourselves in.
Well, look, I think that's a really good place to end on, because I'm conscious of that we're getting to an hour. And what's next? You said sort of family and friends round, and then
I mean we next for us is to talk to we're out talking to a lot of people. We were involved in Plug and Play in the US, which we got onto that program, which has introduced us to quite a few American insurers. One of the weird things about the lockdown is it's kind of shrunk the world completely. So whereas we would have probably stayed away from the States, now it's basically, we've been talking to a lot of companies in the East and the West Coast of America. We're slowly but surely starting back out talking to the London market with we've got demonstrations of our product and what we built. Hopefully sign up. The idea is to sign up 1, 2, 3 pilot programs over the next couple of months, and then set in place a kind of friends and family round, seed round, which is probably going to be. We've had quite a few people that are interested in Dublin, and we've a number of kind of soft commitments from London, and Enterprise Island have basically said, look, we'll back and match any money that you can raise yourselves as well. So we've got that kind of slowly but surely in place, and then hopefully from that, the next thing is a virtuous circle. More customers, hopefully a bit more investment, hire a few more people, and just slowly but surely grow from there.
Fantastic. And if anyone's interested in kind of finding out a bit more, as it is in your space, the best way to contact you via the website, LinkedIn, or? Yeah,
I mean, we have it's describedata.com. We have a button on the we book a meeting with us. We'll happily chat with you, or just drop us a line. We can give us a call. All the contact details are there on the website.
Wonderful, brilliant, Michael. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. Really appreciate it. That was really interesting.
That was great. It was very enjoyable.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Listen, have a great day.
Thanks, pal. Bye.